time once again for Community Forum, and we are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning, Sakara Remmu. Sakara Remmu is the founder of Black-owned media broadcasting company, also known as BOMBCo, and host and executive producer of Under the Redline. She was first published in 2001 after witnessing a violent crime and police shooting in Seattle. In 2007, she started writing the Sable Verity social commentary and became a regular contributor to local and national online, print, and radio outlets, including local outlets KBCS and Real Change News. And she is here to talk about her latest investigative series, Under the Redline, The Life and Death of Nicole Cearo. Sakara, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So start out, tell us about BOMBCo and your motivation in founding it.
Oh, boy. Well, ultimately, the motivation in founding BOMBCo is because myself and others come with 16-plus years experience in journalism, media, and storytelling as Black and people of color professionals. And from the staff reporter to the beat reporter to the columnist to the radio commentator to the personality on television, there are systemic barriers that exist and cultural ignorance and indifference that exists in the ultimate publication and storytelling and accuracy of a work. And that happens at all levels, from, again, staff reporter to beat reporter to columnist to investigative journalist, TV personality to editor, managing editor, editor at large, publisher, advertisers. All of that impacts the truth of a situation and what ultimately gets reported. And what we needed to do was to create an in-house platform that covers all bases so that the essence of the truth and the nectar, no matter how ugly or bitter it may be, ultimately becomes published work.
So talk about Under the Redline and how you first became aware of Nicole Cearo.
So Under the Redline is one of our podcast series, probably going to be our flagship podcast series at this point in time, just based on its success. Nicole Cearo was not initially the first story that we wanted to tell, but I first became aware of Nicole Cearo a year after she disappeared. She disappeared in 2009. The Seattle Police Department went public with her story roughly 2010. So as a member of the media, I got the same press release that any other outlet got. And I got this shining, beaming face of this girl and some pretty horrific implicating details of an alleged murder. And didn't have the capacity at the time to tell that story, but I simply could not forget Nicole Cearo. I never forgot Nicole Cearo. I looked into it over the years, discussed it with media relations over the years in the department, have sources throughout the city based on other stories that I've worked on, heard things that were significant that I had always locked away. And so when we decided to create Under the Redline, which explicitly is covering stories that corporate mainstream media isn't taking the initiative or the resources to really delve into and ask important questions about, for whatever those journalism so white reasons may be, we wanted to make the attempt to do that with this story. And it got to the point for me last year. We started working on this story June of last year. About 6 months prior to that, I was thinking about Nicole Cearo daily, specifically because I knew police had looked for her body in certain areas of the city where I had lived and raised my children. and to know that they felt that this 20-year-old young woman was somewhere in the city of Seattle, which is infinitesimal to other metropolitan cities across the country, was horrific, unfathomable, shameful, and it seemed impossible and inevitable that there couldn't be some sort of resolution at some point in time. So I really started to feel like I was going to look back at this particular moment last year when we made this decision to start looking at this story, having absolutely no idea what it was, that it would be a regret, a life regret, that I would look back at some point in time and know I was supposed to do something with this platform for this particular story, and I failed to do that. So that was the ultimate catalyst for don't know where it's going to go, don't have any clue what we're going to find, don't know how long it's going to run for, don't know what any kind of implication it may have. But we are going to try, and then we will know that I will know that I won't have any regret because I tried to find out about the life of this young woman and what may have happened in her death.
So talk more about that. Talk about her life and her death that you touch on in what is currently appears to be a 14-part series.
Currently a 14-part series. Nicole Cearo was 20 years old when she disappeared. She was pregnant, which I did not initially realize when I started looking into the story. That resulted in her very quickly being classified as missing and endangered by the Seattle Police Department, who did an interview for our series with very limited information. She didn't have the easiest life. She's not status quo Seattle. According to corporate mainstream media, she's not a sympathetic victim. She's been in the foster care system. She's had run-ins with the law. She's made some difficult choices to survive. That's basically me as well. So I see it from a completely different side. And we really delve into that, not with me personally, but the fact that there are two separate Seattles in Seattle. And Nicole Cearo belonged to a separate side of Seattle that is basically the exact opposite of the status quo, progressive, hipster, forward-thinking, we're doing everything, our intention matters more than our impact. That was her reality. And she was vulnerable, she was young, she was undereducated, and she was exploited throughout her entire life. And had very difficult decisions that she had to make in order to survive. Ultimately, what we found, we didn't know any of this at the time, but ultimately what we found was a very courageous young woman trying to step into a different aspect of life. And in the process of that, leave a volatile and allegedly violent relationship.
So you touched on that in a press release this week. The difference between Seattle and the town. Is the town what you were talking about just now?
Yes.
So talk more about Nicole's specific. Talk about March 30th, the events around that in 2009.
So March 30th, 2009, what we've been able to put together through multiple sources and witnesses is that Nicole was physically abused and threatened throughout the day at multiple locations and ultimately wound up at a bar in South Seattle. And what we have determined may have very likely been taken forcibly from that location by her alleged killer and potential accomplices. some point during that time, she ran for her life. There's no other way to say it. I mean, she ran for her life. And people knew that she was coming to them. They were waiting for her. They were expecting her to arrive. And they knew that she was allegedly running from a man with a pistol who had threatened to kill her. And they never heard from her again, and they never spoke to her again. And what is significant about these events is that we had been hearing for many years about different houses, different incidents, different locations where things had happened. Dozens of people having different overlapping, correlating pieces of the story that they saw, witnessed, or heard firsthand. And being able to piece together that it wasn't necessarily what we expected that it was, that it's actually potentially quite horrifying. I mean, murder in any sense is quite horrifying. But this is somebody from the beginning of the day to her last moments likely knew that she was going to die, that potential was very real that day and in that moment. And we know that based on public information that the police record went as far as March 30th, 2009. And where our record goes to is March 31st, 2009. And absolutely, unequivocally confirming locations that she has been in that we believe are directly tied to the murder and individuals that may be involved in the murder. That's not anything we expected to have happen. We had actually wrapped knowing much of that information, but for multiple reasons, not including it. And within an hour of the finale being published, basically the town inundated us with information of what they expected to hear, what they knew was coming next, because the town knows about this murder. That became evident very quickly. It just became stripping away who knew the truth of the matter and who knew the legend that had developed over an 8-year period of time. So that's been a lengthy process that you have to be really patient with. You know, one journalist might assume that somebody is being dishonest when in really they are working through their memory. I mean, this is 8 years' time gone by. And we think, we would like to assume something so dramatic would be recalled instantly. And for some people, some things are. And in other cases, it's a process of development and conversation. Usually interviews are an average of 5 hours long of just talking and getting that familiarity and bringing it back to the time in every way that we can possible for people to really kind of transport them back. So that's been an interesting process. Time and memory is a unseen character in this entire process.
And in this process of your investigation, you've reached out and talked to over 100 people. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and how many of those do you have a sense for found out about your work and online and then came forward with information?
The majority of. We initially started with a bevy of public documents related to her missing persons case, not related to her homicide. That's not public information because it's an active, ongoing case. So we were able to glean a lot of names from that and a lot of family trees from that. So we kind of knew peripherally who was potentially involved and start making contacts in that way. But what really kind of broke it for us, in a sense, was understanding that we were looking into the life and death of the girl named Nicole Cearo, and the town didn't know Nicole Cearo. The town knew Capricorn. And so once we met Capricorn, we had 10,000 downloads and listens that day, just that day alone. And from that moment on, it was just not necessarily a rush of instant information, but a rush of relief in the town that somebody cared. A lot of, I would say, as I said before, guilt and shame, and a lot of hope and a lot of outrage, and feeling just the overwhelming emotion coming from so many different directions for so many different reasons, that people knew this young woman and cared about her and knew about what allegedly happened to her. They had been waiting and hoping and praying that at some point in time, somebody was going to just get into it. And once they started to learn about the process of journalism, which has been critical in this, because we're talking about disenfranchised communities that don't have access to how these things work. And so that's been a part of the podcast as well, is educating about the process of how it is we do what we do. Once people started to really understand how that works and what our intention was, what we do and don't do, many felt like I felt, if I don't speak with this journalist, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life, even though it may endanger me or somebody that I know. If I don't speak with this journalist and let her know exactly what I know and what I saw, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life, because what happened to this young woman and her unborn baby is wrong. No matter who did it, it's wrong. And the fact that her body has not been recovered is outrageous and unacceptable. And it's okay to be a journalist and feel that way and still be able to be objective about anybody who may or may not have had anything to do with it. I think a lot of times people like to say you absolutely have to be 100% objective. We're all human beings, so that's not even possible. What you have to do is know when you're not and know what your bias is. Have a good team around you and good mentors around you who can coach you through how you can navigate yourself and all the pieces of a story to tell the truth of the story and not the truth of your own opinion or what you speculate. There's a difference between investigative journalism and extrapolation and your own personal opinion and speculation about what may have happened. We keep the two absolutely 100% separate. My personal opinion has absolutely nothing to do with what we present on air, but my personal experience as a member of the town and as a member of Seattle informs all of the work.
So you touched on this, but talk about some of the challenges you have to deal with. It sounds like one of them is dealing with the concept of that if people come forward, they're snitching.
Correct. So I have a lot of people that ask me if I'm a police officer or accuse me of being a police officer or of working with the police, none of which is true. We covered in the podcast what it is to have probable cause to be able to arrest somebody. And in this case, in my opinion, what police need in probable cause to arrest is not a body, it's people in the town coming forward and speaking and sharing what they know. If I were a police officer, and in fact, these people are coming to me directly, I would have probable cause to put people in jail. So the ultimate evidence that that is not the case is that people are not in jail as we air this interview. Regardless, I'm still not a police officer, still don't work with the police. But that kind of getting through that and having that conversation and not dismissing it for people, and understanding that there is a difference between telling the story of a situation and correcting the record and then snitching to an authority who has the power to put handcuffs on you, arrest you, detain you, and then charge you with something. And there is a truth of a story that pulls at the town that they want told. And so town culture will remain the same. This isn't going to change no snitch culture. This isn't going to change people and individuals and groups from intimidating witnesses and victims in crimes. But what this has done in this particular case is it has caused the individuals to challenge within themselves, why am I upholding this culture? I know I have legitimate reason. I know there's a problem between my community and policing. But is that good enough reason? And does it have anything to do with standing up and doing what's right for this particular person, this person who lived a life with a life within? And that's a process that they go through on their own. We don't tell people to go to the police. That's not our job. We have that information on our website. We air it when we feel it's appropriate. But we understand, because I know the town and have lived it myself, that is an individual process that each person has to go through themselves to determine what the ultimate answer is going to be and if they're going to step forward to the police or not.
So of the numerous interviews you did during your investigation, you had the fortune of speaking directly and airing some of those interviews. One of them was with Nicole Cearo's father, who basically had a message that he believes that the murderer is known and is looking for a resolution on this. Can you talk briefly about that?
Michael Cearo, great man, loves his daughter, and is absolutely devastated. And I think we both hung up from that interview impacted by that conversation a great deal. And what sticks with me the most is he really asks the question logically, rhetorically, spiritually, parentally: how am I supposed to live the rest of my life and die and never know what happened to my daughter and where she is? And why is the state of Washington, ultimately, whether it's King County or whatever, why are they not taking this to trial? Which is a question we can't answer. We don't have the answer to that. We have our opinions. It was important to not only speak with him, it was important to air an interview with him, because it's important to remind people. The town keeps referring to Nicole Cearo as a body that will never be found, the body that will never be found. This is a story about a person that was alive, that was living a life, who was murdered. And so to have a parent expressing their pain was bringing it back to, let's remember what this story is about, regardless of where it's pushed to as an investigation of a murder. Let's remember who this is about and who loved her and how they're impacted by not having answers and closure at every level possible. So that was important. It was also important, just straight up, for the town to hear from a man who has served time in prison, a black man, say, I want my alleged killer or killers taken to trial and held legally accountable, criminally accountable for what they have allegedly done to my daughter. Both of those things were important for the town to hear be said, because the town can hear that. That's one of those things that they can't deny, having heard and knowing where it's coming from.
Only a couple minutes left. So where does this story go from here? You continue to produce up until a week or so back, continue to produce podcasts, each one which has more amazing revelations in it as to like that somebody actually knows where the body is and has spoken so to you. And you're taking a lot of heat for continuing with this story.
Yes, definitely a lot of threats, credible threats that we're consistently negotiating on a regular basis. The story continues regardless. We have every reason to believe that we will be back in short order with very important updates on any potential progress in the criminal investigation or potential prosecution of an individual or individuals related to this case. I think that at this point in time is unequivocal.
All right. We're talking with local investigative journalist Sakara Remmu. She is founder of Black-owned media broadcasting company, also known as BOMBCo. And Sakara, where can people connect to your podcasts and find out more about this investigation?
So people can go to our Facebook page, which is Bomb Company. They can go to our website, listen and download, bombmediacompany.com. Most importantly is they need to click on episode 14 and contribute to the work that we will be doing, not only to conclude this story, but our stories throughout the rest of the year, which includes, for lack of a better term, the exploitation of rent boy culture in the Pacific Northwest, particularly when it comes to young women, young girls, and boys of color, who's doing it and how. That's become public knowledge in Seattle lately. That's been a story in the town, up and down the I-5 corridor that we've been aware of for a while, so we're going to push the mic there. We're going to tell some prison podcasts. We're going to get into a couple more Seattle-centric murders, and we have some immigration and queer and trans rights stories coming up this year. So episode 14 is where folks can click to donate, to contribute, to make sure that this work continues. We absolutely need this support. We funded this particular series ourselves. And with 20,000 plus listeners, we know it's going in the right direction. So we're committed to doing this work. And we thank everybody for listening. And we thank you for this opportunity as well.
All right. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you again.